Today's Moravian text reading is Luke chapter 14, verse 7 to 24. Jesus is at a large banquet at the house of a prominent Pharisee. There are loads of special people there from that local community, the hoi polloi, the wealthy, the elite, the rich, all at this meal. I heard someone say once that you could read all of Luke's gospel in this way, that Jesus is on his way to a meal, or Jesus is at a meal, or Jesus is leaving a meal. That's how Luke's gospel is pretty much structured. Most of what Jesus says and does happens within that context. Far more happens in that context than in synagogues and religious buildings. So for us as a church, that's why we primarily place discipleship in the home, around the table. That's the Jesus way of doing things. Anyway, yesterday's reading, Jesus healed this man on the Sabbath of dropsy. We read that yesterday. The issue here for the experts in the religious laws, the Pharisees, was that dropsy wasn't a life-threatening condition. Basically, it's water retention on the joints, the legs, the face that causes swelling. There was nothing in the Old Testament laws that said you couldn't do that. The issue was, it said you couldn't work on a Sabbath. So they spent hours and hours debating what constituted work. And so they'd make up laws like you couldn't exert energy on a Sabbath unless it saved a life. Now, Jesus overrules that. Remember, the Pharisees, they were known as the Lords of the Sabbath. Their job was to enforce the Sabbath rules. But now here is one greater in their midst. They've tried to control him. They've tried to get him to do what they want. It hasn't worked. And now they're basically sort of ignoring it, giving him the cold shoulder, treating him like that so that they don't lose face. Now, this culture at the time was a culture of honour. Everything in this culture was geared around status and having that status recognised. The flip side of that sort of culture, that honour culture, where you need to have a pecking order and have that order recognised, the flip side is a culture of shame. And we see that in parts of the Middle East even to this day. Someone gets a better seat at the wedding banquet than you and you feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed because you haven't been honoured. Now, it is important biblically to honour others. I do believe that. But actually, often I think that some of the ways that we do that plays into status and fuels ego. And that's the sort of thing that Jesus is challenging here in these three little story sections. In the first section, Jesus clearly challenges the pursuit of status, honour and recognition. And I would say that if we find ourselves at times feeling embarrassed or humiliated, it could be an indicator that we're struggling with pride, ambition, the desire to be recognised. And in this new kingdom that Jesus is establishing, the kingdom of God, we are called to take the low place, to serve, to humble ourselves, to wash one another's feet. I remember when I was 17 and I told my pastor at the time that God had spoken to me and called me into church leadership. He said to me, amazing. I can see that. Meet me on Sunday morning early before the service because I've got something really important for you to do. So I turned up to church early on the Sunday morning, all excited, wearing some smart clothes, thinking I was going to do something important like preaching or leading the communion service. And the pastor handed me some yellow rubber gloves and a cloth and some bleach. He said, "The toilets need cleaning, lad." So that's what I did. And I think that's what leadership development often looks like in this kingdom, God's kingdom. It's a call to humble ourselves and to serve. Jesus then develops this idea further with two more stories and illustrations. In the first, we are challenged about the company that we keep and those that we entertain and serve within our homes. Jesus calls us to open up our homes to the outsider, to society's rejects, to those who can't return the favour. Now, in today's culture, we often use our homes like a castle, a place of retreat and safety and comfort, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But Jesus calls us to open up our homes to people other than the safe and familiar, our family and friends. In fact, he says when you do that, you will be blessed. And once again, that's something we try to practice as a church. And I don't know about you, but I've certainly found it to be a huge blessing to us personally when we've done that. Finally, Jesus tells a parable about the end time, really, even though there are different layers. How God is preparing this end time feast, the marriage feast of the Lamb, a banquet. And through Jesus, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the Jewish people, God's people were being invited into God's oikos, into his home for this feast, but they simply refused. They were too important, too busy. They were preoccupied with their own stuff, their own life, to see what was really going on through Jesus. And so what happens? The invitation gets thrown out to all. Even, once again, the most unlikely, the outcasts, the social rejects, even to beyond the Jewish people, to us, the non-Jews, the Gentiles. This is the God we serve. A God who welcomes all to feast at his table. And this is the God we are called to imitate.